and welcome to Quarter Time Podcast. I'm Lucy G.
And I'm Lucy P.
And we're here to bring you all the netball goodness you never knew you needed. Hey everyone, and a big welcome to episode 20, the last episode before the finals this weekend. Mental. We've just about made it to the end of the season and are mere days away from seeing which team out of Loughborough Lightning, Manchester Thunder, Team Bath or Leeds Rhinos will crown themselves as champions of the Vitality Netball Superleague 2021. So Luce, what's on today's show?
Oh, today is a really juicy one. So we've got our usual 3-word summaries of the games from the last round of the regular season, and we'll be whipping through our game of the round and players of the round for the very last time. Emotional. And then we're taking an in-depth look at every team within the league this year, analysing what has worked for some teams and what has been the sticking point for others. To help us with our analysis, we are joined by none other than the lovely Tamsin Greenway. As our first ever Quarter Time pod guest, it was only fitting that she returned at the end of the season to look back on what has been a pretty wild year.
Yeah, great stuff. Sweet. So let's crack on with the 3-word summaries. First up, it was Mavericks versus Storm, and I've gone for squeaky bum time. This was
Awful.
serious squeaky bum time for Mavs after the first half, because they just had a bit of a shocker and they allowed Storm to really hit the ground running and lead by 3 at half time with their, it was their 5th place spot on the line. So definite squeaky bum time, but Mav decided to turn it up a gear, beating Storm by 16 goals in the second half of the game. Wowza. Massive shout out to Jodie Gibson, who had a really great game, and congratulations to Jo Tripp for ending her stellar career on a high. What a nice way to send her off.
Yeah, definitely. Although I resent the use of the phrase squeaky bum time, I'm very against that.
Mate, you need to get on board.
Next up, we have Thunder versus Sirens. And for this one, I said big time flex. Talk about a rough day at the office. For Sirens, this was absolutely not the way they would wanted to finish such a stellar season. But for Thunder, jeepers, it was just total domination throughout the whole game. They won all 4 quarters by 8, 9, 4 and 7 respectively. Thunder were the clear winners across all areas of the court with 21 turnovers to Sirens 10, 12 interceptions to Sirens 3, and their shooters producing some deadly accuracy on 92% compared to Sirens 77%. Yikes.
Next up was Dragons versus Stars, and I've gone for a messy tussle. This game, it was a bit of an arm wrestle, to be honest, with the scores even Stevens at half-time, but Stars just displayed a bit more brute strength in that third quarter, winning 11 to Dragons 6. Stars were able to shine that little bit brighter with 8 interceptions to Dragons 1, but with 21 unforced errors between the teams, it was a little bit of a sloppy affair.
Stars shine brighter. That's really cute.
Right?
Next up, we had Wasps versus Storm. And for this one, I said, where were Wasps? This game was really interesting and gave us probably a bit of a shock result. Although the majority of people would have predicted a Wasps win, their downward trajectory throughout the season coincided horribly for them with an upward lift in form for Storm, who fully deserved to come out on top. It was really good to see Storm put out a full 48-minute performance, even if they did let it slip a little bit in that last quarter. Wasps just didn't really turn up for this match, and will have to seriously rethink their attacking unit in the off-season because there are some big problems there.
Yeah, definitely. Last game of the round, oh my God, this was a cracker. Lightning versus Bath, and I've gone for peaked too soon? ? What a game. Lightning were absolutely world class in this, with every person on court standing up and doing the business. They've really exposed some issues in Bath's attack end again, who were forced into making some really critical changes that I would argue potentially didn't really pay off. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Bath in the semis. Like, will they be able to use this week now to address this issue that's been highlighted a couple of times before then against a really tenacious Thunder side? Who knows?
Defo. Moving on to our games of the round. So Lucy G, which one have you gone for this week?
So I've gone for Wasp versus Storm. I thought this was a cracker of a game, and it's only the second time this season actually that Storm have featured in one of our games of the round, and I think thoroughly deservedly so this week.
Yep.
Storm were generally just better throughout every quarter and throughout every third on court, I think, and you know, their defence in particular were absolutely outstanding. That partnership of Leah Middleton and Felicitas Kawanga is just fire. It was incredible. Although Leah Middleton was pretty highly penalised, she had 19 penalties to her name. That partnership was just fabulous. And I just really wish that we hadn't been denied this until the last flipping round of the season. You know, we've seen little bits of Kawanga here and there, but you know, unless there's been an injury concern that we've not been privy to, I don't know, but I just wish she could have had some more court time. She had a really outstanding game and just blended so well into that Storm lineup, who had 15 turnovers to Wasp 7. I actually think as well, it was one of the strongest games of the season from Mickey Austin. She gave them loads of options in attack, always reoffering. She had some cheeky hands in all sorts of places. Oh. Sorry, Mickey. You know, she was causing loads of turnovers, just being a bit of a pest. It's really good showing from her. The really interesting thing for me was that Rachel Dunn only had 22 goals from 24 attempts. Yikes. 24 attempts from Rachel Dunn. That just proves to me that attacking end just did not gel whatsoever. They could not service the legend that is Dunn. They had a slightly brighter patch when Giselle Allison first came on, but I don't think it quite had the impact that they were hoping for throughout the rest of the match. It sort of petered off relatively quickly. And they only scored 2 goals throughout the first half of that first quarter. 2 goals in 6 minutes. I mean, that's like, yikes. The Wasp defence as well barely got their hand to any ball, which just made matters even worse. And they tried absolutely everything, like in credit to them, they tried everything to patch up their performance, bringing all bar 2 of their players onto the court at various points throughout the game. But nothing they could do would really make a difference. And fair play to Storm, did the business.
Yeah, 100%. It was a great performance from Storm. I think we were all kind of waiting for something like this to happen. And it's great for them to have that finish because it just puts them on such a good level looking ahead to next season.
Yeah, and again, like a really nice way to send off Karen Bailey as well. Like, what a way to end the season. So yeah, credit to you. What game have you gone for, Lise?
So I've gone for the Lightning versus Bath game because I thought it was really interesting. Obviously, both teams prior to this game were coming off a loss. Bath obviously falling to Mavs and Lightning to Thunder. And before it even started, it was a case of which side was going to get control early. And Lightning just totally did that. They won all 4 quarters, keeping Bath to just 8 goals in both quarter 2 and quarter 3. And it was Bath's joint lowest score of the season with 35, exactly the same as in the Mavs game. I think that Lightning probably took some notes from Mavs and they just didn't give Bath any opportunity to settle an attack and they were just looking so hesitant. I think Kim Borgia missed the first attempt and then from there on in it just never really worked. I mean, Gusgoth and Guthrie were keeping Bath in it for large portions of the game. I actually wrote down what the hell did Gusgoth have for breakfast. She had 8 deflections and 3 turnovers. But back up the other end, Rachel Shaw did not have a great game or probably I should say Beth Cobden had a very good game and Shaw was guilty of several errors consecutively in the first and second quarter and just Cobden was just all over her like a rash. She picked up 9 deflections in this game. Incredible. Borgia was another player who I thought was being really well covered by Sam May. And they actually brought Bretzi Creek on in the second half, which you alluded to in the summary. But it didn't really do a lot to help. It was just a hot mess from Bath's attacking perspective. And up at the other end, Trolloc was just a machine, getting Ebony Osoro Brown sent to the bench. And Ella Clark was simply unstoppable. I think what we saw here in this game in particular is that over the season, Lightning have tried and tested a few different combinations. Like we've seen Susie Liversidge in at goal attack. We've seen Ella Clark there. We've seen Nat Panagari in wing defence, and we've seen a bit of Cobden in centre. We've seen Alice Harvey on the bench and Sam May. Like we've seen it, you know. Yeah. However, I think what happened with Bath is that their plan B wasn't working and they were a bit lost about what to do next. They didn't have a plan C. To be fair, though, saying that, Lightning were phenomenal in this game, and it was just a really good example from them of their hard work throughout the season, really good coaching, very good tactical decisions, and that just paying off completely for them in the end.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head in that Lightning have a plan A, B, C, D, all the way down to Z, whereas Bath have A and B, and then it kind of just stops. They don't really have anything
I'd
else.
say they probably have A and A.5.
Yeah, A and a half. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that A and a half or plan B has worked any time that they've had it on, really.
Yeah.
So it really is just plan A or nothing. And teams have figured that out now at the worst possible point from Bath's perspective. So yeah, that Bath Thunder game is going to be absolutely critical.
Huge. Can't wait.
So moving on to our players of the round, hit me out, Luce. Who you gone for?
So I have gone for Felicitas Kawanga this week.
Yes.
The first Storm player to receive this award. Big congrats. Well done. What a fantastic weekend she had in the last weekend of the season. Final doubleheader. Amazing. And this is just really what we were hoping for, given the impression that she made at the World Cup, which, I mean, people are still talking about it. It was 2 years ago. And, she was incredible. She got 2 defensive rebounds, 4 interceptions, 7 deflections and 7 turnovers against Mavericks. And then 1 defensive rebound, 2 interceptions, 4 deflections and 6 turnovers against Wasps. I mean, that's a brilliant weekend by anyone's standards. And then also, she's only 5'8", so she does extremely well and pretty much has no right to be getting rebounds off anybody in that circle. So absolute kudos to her for that.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. That's giving me like vibes. I'm 5'8". I could play for the Super League, right? Someone sign me up.
Yeah, 100%. We'll get them on the phone. So she really has warmed into this season, and I was surprised. We've mentioned this before. We were surprised that we didn't see more of her, but actually, I think it's a great way to ease her in. You think about, she's come from Zimbabwe, first player from her nation to ever play in the Super League. It's a huge culture difference. It's a lot of adjustment. And so actually, it's probably very tactical, easing her in rather than putting her on as a starting player every week and expecting her to produce the goods. She's been given that time to adjust. And now we're seeing the rewards of that process. But yeah, what a talent. And I think once those kind of small errors are cleaned up, I think she'll be really lethal. I think she needs to build on her confidence in terms of bringing the ball through court when they're transitioning into attack. Sometimes she can hang back a little bit, but absolutely fantastic performance this week. A player of the match performance in the last game of the season. You couldn't write it, could you? It's a fairy tale finish.
Yeah, it was so great to watch her, and the partnership that she'd built with Leah Middleton, towards the back end of the season, like it was great. But I do wonder, if Alima Priest hadn't been injured, would she have actually been given that opportunity? I don't know. Like it would just, I suppose we'll never know.
Well, we'll never know if she would have done, but she should have done.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. But yeah, no, fab week from her.
Who have you gone for, Luce?
So I have gone for Emma Dovey, another defensive week. She is just so understated, I think. Like, she just gets her head down. She's similar to Nat Panagari for me in that she just gets her head down, gets the job done, doesn't do like loads of the flashy stuff, but she is just absolutely solid. She had 1 defensive rebound, 5 interceptions, 5 deflections, 7 turnovers, and critically, only 6 penalties as a sole defender. And actually, if you look at the last 3 games that she's played, her penalty count was 6, 9, and 5. For a
Wow.
serving defender, I just think that's nuts. So not only is she really, really effective, she's incredibly clean. And so she's keeping herself in play to be even more effective. So she's just dreamy. And I think she also does a wealth of work in attack. There was in the game against Sirens, there was multiple passages of play where she was taking every other ball throughout the defensive third and the midcourt to bring it down into that attacking end. So she does an absolute mountain of work. I just think she is a bit of an unsung hero, actually, of the Thunder team, and critical to their success. Brilliant week from her.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that they really noticed when they were without her a lot this when she was injured for a few weeks in this season. And it's great that she's back now in time for finals, because Thunder need her in that back line. She's so crucial for them.
Yeah, definitely. Coming up next, it's absolute fan favourite and analytical queen. It is Tamsin Greenway, who is rejoining us to recap the 2021 season as a whole.
It is such an honour to welcome Tamsin back onto the show. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. It seems like ages ago when I was first on with you guys. I think the first ever episode, so it's really nice.
Yeah, it was back in February. Yes, you are our very first Quarter Time podcast, which is a huge honour, I think. And we thought it was pretty fitting to have you come back on at the end of the regular season and to hear your thoughts about how the different teams have been tracking. So before we get into that, what has been your overall impression of the league in 2021?
Well, I think it's been one of the closest encounters so far. I think it's been a brilliant season. I think full credit goes to everyone behind the scenes to actually get it up and running, like how we've got to round 20 with probably only one major disruption throughout, but still being protocol in place to make sure that everything happened, I think is fantastic. I think the venues look great. I think we have to thank Sky for putting every game on live across YouTube and the TV as well. I think we've had more access and availability to netball than we've ever had in this country, and I think that's been a massive success. I think if I then go to my analytical point of view, I do think we still need to look at the league moving forward in terms of making sure we definitely don't take a backward step from this year in terms of how we've produced it and put it on. And also I do think, even though it's been the closest league we've had in a long time in terms of top four, we're still probably 2 or 3 teams over the quota to make sure that every team is competing at the top level. But overall, brilliant year.
Yeah, interesting you say that. I think we'll touch on that a little bit later about the number of teams in the league. But yeah, it's just been fantastic, hasn't it, to be able to have that access. And we just hope that, you know, we keep moving forward and kind of long may this kind of coverage continue, because it's just been absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's been absolutely amazing. I think from my point of view, from somebody who works in the media, who's also coaching, who's also been a player, to have that kind of level of exposure, that's kind of scrutiny, those kind of debates and chats that we've been able to take part in this year, it's just taken it to another level. And I think it's up the game in terms of the engagement and also how we can approach people, get more interest and more sponsors moving forward as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So looking at the Super League table, the teams we think kind of fit into 3 clear groups. So we're going to look at each group in detail and see which teams impressed and which sides have areas to improve on for next season. So first up, let's take a look at the bottom end of the table: Celtic Dragons, Surrey Storm and 7 Stars. So kicking off with Celtic Dragons. Dragons' goal difference at the end of the year is minus 383, which works out on average as a 19.2 goal losing margin. They were 19-1 for the season and the only team to have over 1,000 goals scored against them, finishing up at the bottom of the table. I don't think it would be exaggerating to say that they have had a bit of a shocker this year. And with the announcement that Tanya Hoffman will be leaving, there's no doubt going to be some big changes at the club soon. So what do you think is the biggest reason why Dragons struggled to perform this year? Was it a case of recruitment, the travel, the structures on court, or something else entirely?
So I think it's quite an interesting one with Dragons. I was quite critical of them at the start because I didn't really see the improvement over the first few weeks. You know, I get that teams are finding their feet. I get there's got to be teams at the top and teams at the bottom. But what I struggled with was their journey. Where were they going? I think they definitely started to show some signs of that towards the end of the year when they got a more structured lineup. And I think that's been key for most of the teams around that bottom. You know, have they stuck to task? Have they got a lineup that and a way of playing that works for them? Look, I think it's hard to listen to their stats when you've got someone like Amy Clinton under the post, because you're like, much more ball, much more opportunities, because she is lethal. I think one of the biggest issues, and a lot of the talk you've heard from Tanya is about the issues around COVID and training and access and stuff. And I do know that we had different rules in Scotland and there were different rules in Wales, so they were in England. But I think it does come down to the bigger picture. Recruitment is a huge part of this. Bringing in imports that are the level that you need them at, I think is important. And it's always a lottery. I've been there trying to bring in imports when you don't know much about them. You know, Anna Lee-Jones should have slotted in so well, and yet it was a very up and down season for her. So I think recruitment's been a big ask. I think just like we've had to address in Scotland, they're going to have to do the same in Wales about how they get this full-time programme and a netball programme operating for these players that take them to the next level. Because I think that's the only way Dragons are going to be able to survive and improve, really.
Yeah, it's difficult because we've now seen almost this separation of the Welsh side and the Dragons side. Do you think that it's better when those kind of franchises work in harmony with the national side a little bit more like we see with Sirens?
I think you've got to work in harmony, but I do think there's got to be a separation. It's something we definitely approached this year with the Thistles to the Sirens in terms of having two different coaches and different setups. So my input is very different to how it would have been under Gail Parata and how it operated before. But I think what you do have to look at is a couple of things for me. When you bring in foreign coaches into an environment, what does that look like? It's a very different prospect coaching over here. If you've only ever coached in New Zealand and Australia, you're not only giving teams tactical information, you're upskilling the player as well. And I think that's probably where Tanya Hoffman had some sort of issues this year. And then secondly, I think the way the national programme and the club programme support each other is behind the scenes programming. You know, so I don't know how much access Dragons are having, how much extra work they're putting in, but that stuff is important. You know, every good high performance programmes, your Bath, your Loughboroughs, they add massive input. Your junior systems coming through in London, your regional academies now, your Super League academies, that's been huge. And I think Celtic Dragons will need to keep addressing that for their young Welsh players who are going to be bulk of that team.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on to Surrey Storm, they're another team who you would say in general have underperformed this season, and they haven't finished higher than 5th since 2017. Their results are actually tracking down each year in terms of ladder position. And you've said that this season there isn't much in Storm's game that seems to have that spark or energy, kind of unexpected, but they did certainly show some of that in the game against Wasps on Monday night. So given the retirement of Karen Bailey, which we know will be a huge loss in terms of experience for the club, what are the key areas you think Storm need to focus on to start challenging those top teams again, which they haven't really done in recent years?
Yeah, Storm have been just the safe team for me, and that's what I mean by the lack of spark. You know, they do everything okay. I think the introduction of Kawanga this weekend was incredible. We actually saw the spark that we were looking for defensively. And I don't think she's been given probably the adequate court time to have shown that all year. But again, it's difficult when you bring an import in, especially she came over from Zimbabwe. So this is the first time accessing this kind of level and that intensity throughout a year, and a really difficult year as well for any import. So I think that's something they need to look at, who they retain. Big question marks about them with getting the shooter in. And I spoke about it earlier in the year. Karen Bailey is really solid, great player, had a great career, has done some great things. But as you come towards the end of your career, and I can say that because I've been there, done it, things change and you change. And for me, they didn't get in the fight enough. You know, when you look at the kind of ball Mvula takes or Cholok takes and the body that Borgia's prepared to do to put on the line for her team, I just didn't see that from Storm. It wasn't lack of trying, but it was the same consistent errors for me. I think it's a difficult one with them in recruitment for where they are. I found that at Surrey Storm as well, just through the university programs and other bits, you don't get the same kind of filter as you would do at one of the top universities, sporting universities, should I say. So I think they're going to have to look at it from a different angle. I think they've done a great job in upskilling some of their current players, your Emily Goulvin, your Alima Priest, those kind of players. But I think they've got to go heavy for a goal shooter for next year. And they've just got to look at something different. I think Mickey Austin's got some decisions to make as well about her role, because player coaching is very, very difficult. And when you're looking for that spark, you know, do you have to be on the court all the time to give that, or are you off the court? So big recruitment year for them, especially as they had grand plans this season. You know, they talk about making top 4. I think they need to retain players like Leah Middleton, because I think she's got loads of potential. But yeah, I think key experience, big shooting target for them, and just adding that extra part to their game. They've almost got to play a bit more fearless.
The Mickey Otter point I find is really interesting, because she's not just the player, she's not just the head coach, but she's also the director of netball. So there's all of that stuff behind the scenes that she's working on as well. And she is just, you know, a one-woman band. Like, I don't know how she finds time to sleep. So it does just seem, you know, it makes me question, is it feasible? Is it sustainable to have one person doing all of those roles? And I think she alluded to that in the post-match interview, that she does need help. So it'd be interesting to see which element of her sort of octopus arms she is willing to give up.
It was the reason I left in the end. You know, when I first took over at Surrey Storm, I was doing all those roles as well. That is all behind the scenes. That's all community. That's everything, player coaching. I had my daughter, and trying to manage all of that as well. It becomes, it's not just about what you're putting out on court. And that's what I'm saying. This is not about her physical capabilities on the court, but it's about, can you take a step back in a position of centre as well? Can you genuinely say what's going on the court? If not, your assistant coach becomes really, really important. And you've then got to trust them to make some calls and make things happen for you on the court as well. I don't envy her at all. I know how tough that position can be. I think they do have to address it, because, you know, they haven't finished where they want to. And if you're brushing back everything this year, you have to look at everything that's happened on the court and off the court. Now, I'm not saying there's any issues there at all. They seem like a really happy bunch with a really good culture, and I've known Mickey for a long time, and I think she's doing a great job. But if you genuinely want to push to top 4, you have to strip everything back and go at it again. So I think that is something they will need to look at and address for next year, because I think she's got a great tactical brain. How easy it is to implement that when you're on the court is a different matter.
Next up, on to 7 Stars. Well, Stars had a pretty slow start to the season, earning their wins in round 5/6, round 9, round 13 and 14, and round 20. And they generally performed better in the second half and had many more close matches. They obviously had issues with injuries, with Liana Leota and Bethan Dyke going down, leaving quite a big hole to fill in terms of the wing attack position. I found it really interesting that Paige Reed was player of the match for them on all 4 of their wins, showing just how key and influential she is in that lineup. What are the difficulties when a team relies too heavily on one player to get them out of trouble?
Yeah, it's a really good point, isn't it? It was an odd season for Stars for me, and it's strange that you've alluded to Paige Reed, because when you look across that board, you were thinking someone like Liana Leota would be key, but actually it doesn't always work like that if you're the superstar in one team. And if you are heavily reliant on one player, it can be an easy tactical pull for somebody else. So, for example, as a coach, I'd be looking at another group going, right, do I take out that player, or do I cut out the players around her so you completely isolate? And I think that's where Stars have come unstuck at times, when they've dipped in and out of games. I think Paige is a great talent. I think she's really stepped up this year, but I think their lack of consistency has come from chops and changes again, but also not all 7 players consistently performing at the same time. And I think we've seen that across the court. Players like Lucy Herdman, for me, have really stood up, have been brilliant this year, but I'd have liked to have seen her stay out there in critical times when the pressure's been on, to see if she can change and adapt her game. So I think for Stars, they will be looking at how they build some of those key positions for next year, especially that sort of centre wing attack role. And, you know, if they are keeping Liana, they are keeping Paige, how are they going to get it to all gel together? Because they're almost a bit of a confusion for me. I don't understand how they haven't done better this year, if that makes sense. And at times, again, it's been that sort of lack of leadership, but I don't understand that with some of the key players in there, like your Nia Jones and your Liana Leotas. And I don't think they're doing it on purpose. It just hasn't come together in big moments.
Yeah, definitely. And you also didn't really know what you were going to get with them. I mean, we didn't see barely any of Malisha Kelly. I thought I was really expecting to see a lot more of her. And then, you know, Dee Bolokoro was sort of in and out. And it was difficult, I think, for them to really settle with that defensive unit as well.
Yeah, definitely. And again, another, import decision, bearing in mind they had Vinkumbu the year before. Like, let's be honest, they let her go. They brought in Kelly, and then Kelly hardly played. And I get that, because actually Herdman's been brilliant. I really rate Melissa Bessel as a coach. One thing you get from her is a great culture, and you can really see that from the buy-in. I follow Nia Jones on Twitter. She's hilarious. And she's not afraid to say what she thinks, which is I love. And you can see they've got that bond and vibe. So for me, I guess it's been a disappointing year, and I'm pretty sure they'd be saying the same. I think the talent is there, but like you say, I'm not a big fan of this chopping, changing continuously. And I think until they can find that and the way they work it through, they've got the players, but they do need to find that consistency for next year.
There's been a lot of talk this season about whether fewer teams would make for a closer competition, and you alluded to it at the start of the episode as well. And looking back, we had 8 teams in the league prior to 2016, and we know that the SSN and the ANZ have 8 and 6 teams respectively. You hear a lot about teams building year on year, growing these connections, and yet Leeds Rhinos have come in and ended up in the top 4 with a brand new side. In your opinion, do we need to be honest about the current talent pool and seriously look at cutting down the number of sides? Or would this be detrimental to the fan bases and reduce interest in the league itself?
I think we've got to be realistic about the product. I think we need to cut down the teams. It's that simple. If you take those three bottom teams there and split up some of those players, I mean, you've suddenly strengthened those ones that are pushing for top 4. It becomes a whole different ball game, and we have to be realistic about that. If New Zealand are the league with the closest goal for goal games, then we've got to take stock of why that's kind of happening. They have 6 teams, Australia are next. After that, they have 8 teams, and we think we can have 11. I think we've got to get over this. First of all, the fan base thing, I get it, but I think we've had something like nearly 20 different teams since Super League was produced in 2005, and we've still survived. Look, it's not ideal. Traveling is not ideal, but the reality is we're not in a position where we can have 20 different teams across the country and everyone's got one on their doorstep to go to. That's just not the way it works. And actually our fan base hasn't proved that that's the way forward either, because we've not had consistently amazing crowds across the board, across the season at every single team. So I think we've got to be realistic. I think we've got to decide what the product looks like, build the fan base as we go along, make sure we're getting access to live games and things on there all the time. But if you honestly want a performance league, make it a performance league and not a development league. Right now, we are both. And every other successful nation that are running a league have a great development league and a brilliant performance league. And I'm not sure we have both.
Yeah, I am 100% with you all the way. I desperately think we need to go down to 8 teams. I think, 10 teams at a push, 11 is just, simply, it's just too many. I don't think there's any denying it. And actually, I get that in every league, there's always going to be someone who comes bottom. Someone has to come last. That's just a fact. But it's the disparity in the quality of performances that makes some games less watchable than others. I don't mind watching my team lose if they're only losing by 1 or 2 or 5 or whatever. But when they're losing by 20 or 30, it doesn't look great for the sport, I don't think.
No, I totally agree. And I'm not sure there's the benefit in it as a performance league if that's the case. Like I say, there will always be a losing team. There'll always be an odd game that blows out. But do we have regular games like that? We shouldn't. We just shouldn't have if we're the best performance league in the country. Yeah,
totally. Back you all the way.
What do you think the reaction would be if the Super League suddenly turned around and was like, yep, we're doing it. We're going down to 8 teams. See you later. What would people say?
Look, I think you've got... The problem is when I tweet a lot of things, a lot of the people on there are diehard netball fans like I am. So it's a difficult one because they don't want to see their team go. There's lots of, oh my God, why do we have to change for other people and blah, blah, blah. And I totally get that. I was a bit like that with the 2-point shot, all those kind of things. However, I like to see the bigger picture. And actually... there is nothing wrong with trying things at the moment. I think there'd be unrest with certain teams. I think they'd be upset, which is fine. But until we can have, and the problem is it's behind the scenes stuff, until you've got 8 teams, or even, I would love to have a 12-team league, right? But with that, each team has to commit to an X amount of money and a full-time program. They have to. We can't keep allowing all our England players go off to a full-time program and not have full-time programs operating in our clubs. And you wonder why you get this disparity. there's no rocket science here. If you had 12 teams that could all put on performance coaching, pay it properly, full-time programs, you wouldn't have a problem. But we don't. Every team is training differently. Every coach is operating differently. Every club comes at it from a different angle. And so that's my biggest argument. So if we can't do that, you've got to strip it back to what works. And I just think that that's the easiest way to do it at the moment.
And you can see as well in the distribution of roses in the league, you know, you can see where they're all congregating in those top teams, and it's obvious.
Yeah, of course it is. And it's always been the way. And we've tried so many different things. When I first started, we used to separate the players. So you were sent to different clubs. They did one year where they said you could only have a max of 5 England players in the team. Well, Bath had 8, all of which they produced themselves. So 3 players had to be sent off to other teams. Even though they were living in Bath at the University of Bath, training in Bath, they still had to go to other teams. They've tried so many different ways. So I just think you've got to start being smarter about how we pull this together. And it's not to upset people. Let's genuinely talk about performance. It's the best league in the country, so make it the best league.
Yeah, 100%. It'll be really interesting to see what happens in the next sort of 5-10 years. Will be absolutely critical. So let's turn our attention now to the next group on the table, that kind of mid-table bunch, the teams that had the big aspirations at the start of the season but didn't quite manage to make it to the top 4. So in 8th position is London Pulse. Now, some people would probably, I imagine, question their inclusion in this almost but not quite group. However, their goal difference at the end of the season was only -59, which is an average of -3 per game that they played. And they also managed to beat Mavericks and deny them that spot in the top 4. They are another team, I think everyone would agree, who had a much better second half to the season. They lost their first 4 games in the trot, but then won their last 3 consecutively. And for them, it was all about getting those attacking combinations working, as we know that their defensive units can win them absolutely tons of ball. So as a coach, what do you do when you've got 4 really solid shooting options, but things just aren't clicking in that attacking end? What do you do?
Firstly, make a decision and stick to it. I think this is my biggest. Look, I was coming at this from a player. So you're asking me if I was a player, and every week I didn't know if I was starting. I didn't know what shooter I was going on with. I didn't know what goal attack I was going on with. How does that make you feel? Genuinely. Now, outwardly, you might be all for the team and it's all fine, but inwardly, regardless whether it's conscious or unconscious, you are thinking about those things. I played a whole World Cup where I wanted Pam Cookie to be my goal attack because I trusted her inward. I'd trained with her, I knew everything. And every time it wasn't her, there's that moment where it's like, oh God, and it's like, it's fine. And that's the reality. You build combinations, you build structures. There is still, to me, not a team in the world that has 12 equal players that can go on at any one time and give you the same performance consistently. So I just think you have to get to a point where you're like, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. You might change it at half time to a whole different structure, which is fine, but there's on, off, different partnerships. And we saw so many, and I mean so many. I mean, they pretty much tried every single player in those different centre, wing attack, goal shooter, right? And they found it in the end. And I think actually Tasheen has stepped up a whole new level in her partnership with Decca. But you kind of think about if they'd have tried that at the start and kept it, where would they have been in the middle of the season then towards the end rather than what happened? And look, it's so difficult. I've been there when you've got 2 big shooters, your Rachel Dunn, your George Fishers, like it's hard to keep everybody happy. But I do genuinely think Pulse got better when they were almost forced to keep players on the court due to injury. And you saw some incredible performance. And I tell you what, that team is only going to get better. Sam Bird should be very excited about what she's achieved with them towards the end of this year and what they can potentially do next.
Well, depending on how their recruitment goes, do you think it seems slightly premature to say that Pulse are, destined, I suppose, for a higher finish next season?
Yeah, I think they do need a couple of, probably one experienced player in the midcourt that's going to step up and do something, because I think when you look at those 3 that are consistently have made the top 3, the difference in their midcourt is just insane. Your Panagaris, your Guthries, your Malcolms, it's just, you've got to be able to compare that. So I think that's probably the area where they need to have a look. But yeah, there is no reason why they can't take the next step and be pushing for top 4 with some of their performances they did. And with like Fadoju, I mean, I genuinely think she could be knocking on the door for Commonwealth Games. I mean, if you've got a 4th spot, why would you not take her?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been saying this for weeks to anyone who would listen to me. I'm absolutely obsessed with that girl. She is just phenomenal. She reminds me so much of Sonia McCloma, who's one of my all-time favourite players. So yeah, she's such a talent. So next up on the table, unbelievably, is Wasps, who finish in 7th place. I know, hand to the face already. It's quite a long way from their top 4 finish that most people would have thought they'd have at the start of the year. So despite having the best goal difference in the middle group with 80, they had a pretty terrible second half to the season and were almost the opposite of teams like Pulse, and only ended up winning 2 of their last 9 games. Unfortunately for them, the dip in form came at the worst possible time, and it's the only time in their history that they finish outside of the top 4. Mel Mansfield said after the Storm game that, and I quote, "It wasn't the team that she signed at the start of the season." With Kandapa and Christian obviously out of the equation, Wasps just genuinely really struggled. But what other factors do you think contributed to their dip in form?
Look, I will be brutally honest. I was gutted watching that game for them. I think at that point in the season, though, it is very difficult mentally to get your team prepared for something. But they will. I know they're all gutted as well. But a couple of things for me. There are not many teams in this league that could lose 2 players covering the same position, starting players covering the same position, and go on to get into top 4. Kandapa and Christian were your 2 wing attack centres. And what did happen is it bumped Flanagan into the middle, and you couldn't put her back at wing defence. And she's not a full game centre. She's great half and half, but she's a world-class wing defence to me. So I will give them some defence on that. But there were some warning signs across the season. Wasps have actually consistently been very good. They've got one of the best defensive records in the league. Like, they've been brilliant in that sense. But they have 3 or 4 minutes in every game where they just go AWOL, where it just goes off the chart. So you only have to look back to their first 2 games of the season playing against Loughborough and Bath. They only lost to Bath by 4. They were beating Loughborough until do you remember that game? To the very last 2 minutes?
That's amazing.
Like, the warning signs were there, how you finish off. And that happened against Mavericks. Very different story if they'd beaten Mavericks a couple of weeks ago. They were 8 up at one point, 8 up, and they still lost that game. So I think for them, it's probably a really tough one to take. And from the outset, it's like, what the hell happened? But, that is a learning curve for the team. Impact, how do you change that? Who's your leader on the court? And I think they are missing a leader. Since someone like Nat Haythornthwaite left, obviously I retired. Sophia Kandapa is a huge leader, and she stepped away with her pregnancy this year. So that has been a massive step for them as well. I think they've got players that can do it, Iona Christian, players like that, but they've got to be able to get a ball to Rachel Dunn. How she's only putting up 24 attempts in one game is just, that's mind blown.
Yeah, crazy. And funny you should say that, leadership, because they're also missing the likes of, Jade Clark, Hannah Knights, and both of them really stepped up into that leadership role. So yeah, they have lost quite a number of those key figures over the years.
Yeah, and I think that's what people have kind of forgotten. They look at Wasps, and you almost look at Wasps as a team rather than the actual team. I still think that group has got a huge potential, because I think there's certain players that will get better and better in there. But, that'll be a knock to them this season, and they'll be gutted. I expect them to come back fighting. It'll be interesting to see their recruitment, as you heard Mel Mansfield talk about. And yeah, that'll be quite intriguing to see what holes they need to fill.
So moving from a team's worst finish to a team's best, Sirens absolutely smashed this season. It was amazing to watch them, and they just absolutely tore up their previous reputation as an easy win for the top teams. And they didn't allow Wasps or Mavericks to take points from them all season, which was amazing. They won 10 games out of 20, and you really got the sense that it was to do with them working out how to take the win in those really close games, particularly in the second half of the season, where they won the 2 draws that they had in the first round of fixtures. So what do you think has been the key to Sirens' success this year? You can say my coaching influence, that's fine.
Definitely not mine. Karen Atkinson, Leslie McDonald have done a fantastic job. And I think the shift, look, sometimes things just fall into place as well. Vinkumbu, for example, she wasn't supposed to be signed. They were supposed to have Zambin Bella. She did her ACL back in South Africa. Vinkumbu was someone that was added to the list quite late on. And, look how well she's done. Like literally look how well she's done. So I think what's happened is they found a style that suited their team. Players that, have probably just been there and thereabouts at good Super League players. She's just standard good. Taylor Cullen stepped up to another level this year. She's been outstanding. Yes. So I think you've had that, but it's more about the journeys. When I talked about those teams at the bottom, it was the confusion of the journey they were on. Sirens weren't confused. They started with their team. They adapted a couple of bits, like the Nick McCleary to a Beth Dix, with a Niamh McCall getting back into that goal attack position, and they've stuck with it and they've improved week in, week out. One of the big issues at the start of the year they weren't getting enough attempts. And suddenly they've improved that. Emma Barry has got stronger and stronger. Niamh has been sharing the load. And I think that's what I've been more pleased with, is that this team has gone from here to here. And it's had its ups and downs, and you've got to the point where they're gutted when they're losing and getting smashed by Thunder like they did in the last game. That's not how they wanted to finish the season. But it's also a note to them as well that actually they've gone from here to here, but the next jump to top 4 is another level again. And that's something that they'll need to address. But I think it's a great group. It's a great culture. Players are happy and players are playing their style. And that is something that could be said for a lot of teams that probably haven't performed. Have you got your players playing the right kind of system?
And thinking all the way back to the start of the season, you alluded to it there, but obviously the loss of Lindsay Gallagher was a huge blow for them. But then in the midst of all that, Niamh McCall just came to life when she was given the opportunity. I actually think she's devastating. Like when she shoots those long bombs, you're just like, oh my God, how is she doing this? It's incredible. So from a Thistle's perspective, your shooting end is looking pretty stacked. So how will you start to make those decisions around selection as we look ahead to Com Games next year?
Well, look, it's a really exciting position to be in, and I'm really pleased that those young shooters have stepped up. And Niamh in particular has really impressed me this year. She's a great character on and off the court, and she doesn't mess around. And yet she's still got so much to learn as well, and she wants to. So that's great. I think we have to be realistic. Look, the Sirens have 4 starting players in that group that aren't Scottish, and Vinkumbu is one of them, Taylor Cullen, Dia Abernethy and Beth Dix. So, I mean, there is a big transfer, and there are still things to work on behind the scenes, because a lot of my Scottish players then aren't getting regular Super League netball. So, there is a step up, and there's parts that we're putting in behind the scenes. But we've got a great building foundation, and actually what we're creating now is a group that know how to win. And that is something that is so important when you're going onto the big stage. So we got a lot of work to do. I'm happy to get my group in the summer and get our first competition at the end of August, which is amazing. But I've still got 3 goalkeepers that are sitting overseas that I won't see this summer, that we won't be able to get back in. So we are being very realistic of where we're at as well.
Nice. So finally, in this group, we have the unfortunate Mavericks. I think Lucy G summed this up so well when she referred to Mavs as consistently inconsistent. They almost have the kind of 2019 Magpies effect, where they just have this team of superstars, but they can't gel consistently. They've also been plagued by injuries. It's been a bit of a shocker for them. However, they were the only team to beat Bath on 2 occasions, but then they had huge losses the next day after both of those key games. And we noticed that Mavs were only able to score more than 50 on 5 occasions this season, compared with Loughborough, who scored more than 50 on 15 occasions and never once scored below 42. So you've spoken about teams needing to break that 40 mark this season. Where was it going wrong for Mavericks?
It's the nature of the errors for me with Mavericks. And I guess people will say I've been quite critical of Mavericks. I love that team. If you gave me that team as a coach on paper, you'd be like, wow, sign me up for some of that. They are amazing, individually talented. I've played with the Corbin sisters. Gabby Marshall, I think, has got huge potential. I think she's one of the most underrated players around, a real winner. I guess for me, it's why they can't tidy up. Is it an issue of how they're being asked to play? Are they being asked to play that way? Can their flair be reined in across the board? And that's all of them, all their players, because that's how Mavericks, play. And what's going to change? What has changed this season? There is no doubt that when they've beaten the top teams and they've performed, that you stand back and go, wow, like Jodie Gibson back on court this year, please let her get back into the Roses side. I hope that knee holds up so she can do that. Her partnership with Raz Quashie was insane. One of the big reasons they beat Bath. When Kadeen and Venter are on it, it's untouchable, but it just goes in and out of fads, like turnover ball, bringing the ball through court. it's that old age question: how do you rein it in? How do you rein in so much talent? And I'm not sure, looking at the group, if it's possible. I think you're going to have to make some sacrifices moving forward to keep the core group that you want to build around, and then look at some of the stability around it. Difficult one, because why would you get rid of any of those players in there? And you also want to look at it and go, oh, I can make it work. But they consistently kept making the same mistakes, and that is always a warning sign.
Yeah, they almost need a steadying influence. I think it's like they all just get a little bit too carried away, and then no one's there to sort of really, like, you haven't got a Jade Clark there to just say, okay, everyone, let's just calm down and really focus on the basics.
Yeah, well, I think Gabby Marshall can do that role, but she needs to be in the middle to do that role. And again, with the injuries and COVID and all other kinds of things, they have had to switch and change their team around. It must be so frustrating for them. I'd really love to, I don't think you'll ever get sort of the honest thing from them, because it must be gutting. But, that team hasn't made a finals now for a long time. And they should be there. They should be there. So I'm really intrigued. I've got a lot of time for Kat Ratnapala. I love Camilla Buchanan. I think they're brilliant coaches. So I'm actually genuinely interested to see how they turn that fortune around for that group.
Moving on to the top four. So obviously we had the announcement last week in regards to Leeds Rhinos that their final fixtures weren't able to be played. So the results from the first set of fixtures were used instead, which obviously earned them a place in the top four. At the start of the year, I highly doubt that anyone could have predicted that would be the way that things would turn out. And in your article for Sky Sports, you talked about transparency and the need for greater communication between the league and the fan base in relation to situations like this, but also in terms of squad announcements. I mean, we never know who's in and who's out. Sometimes we're seeing on Instagram, that a player's flown away somewhere and then we might not be seeing them, etc. Yeah.
Tokyo Olympics or en route to Australia, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Who knows? So can you tell us why you think that transparency is such a problem in netball particularly?
I just think it comes down to the product again. What are we trying to achieve? And look, again, I don't say this with any criticism to individuals or whatever, but it has to be a group process. I know Manchester Thunder tweeted me and were like, we're always trying to push things out. And I know everybody is. And I know every club's situation is different in terms of the media comms that they have and that, but I can honestly tell you, working in the media is difficult sometimes. I found out how to pronounce Kim Borgia's name because someone on Instagram had a go. So I messaged Serena that next morning and she sent me a voice note and we got all that cleared up. That's one of the little things. I'm having to look on Instagram to see whether Donnell Wellham will be there for the semi-finals or not. And I see her on a flight back home, so guess not. We could have quite easily at Sky produced a whole piece about Donnell Wellham going into this. So, this is all my personal opinion. It's nothing coming from Sky, and it's nothing coming from clubs or anything else. But I care about the sport and the product and coming at it from all angles. I just think we need to be better. I love the fact that Suncorp give you your team lists on a Friday. You know who's in, you know who's out, you know the reasons. I'm not having to text someone courtside to go, why isn't, X here this week and that and stuff. And if we want to tell better stories, we have to know the stuff. I don't need the whole ins and outs. We just need to be able to have the full information. And I just do think we can all be better across the board.
Yeah. Tamsin for PM here. Like, I'm so with you on this, but I also think it actually acts as a blocker for fans to really be able to engage and buy into their teams. Like, there's just so many barriers, and the little small things, like not knowing who's in a squad or who's out of squad or where that person's gone, why they're not playing. Like, it all just adds up to these like a bit of disappointment, and so it really restricts you from being able to buy into a team, I think.
I also think and I think it stops the prolonged stories. So you take the 2019 World Cup announcement, right? So Amara Brazy, your England captain, is dropped from the squad. Now, personally, I think that could have been announced 2 weeks before or whatever, so she has her opportunity to come out as England captain, be gutted, be whatever, do whatever. Then it gives you a week to talk about who's been picked, who else is in that squad, what else is happening. that squad found out and it didn't get announced for 2 weeks. Well, most of us in the netball world had found that squad out in about 24 hours. And that was supposed to be kept quiet for those 2 weeks. Then you have the whole, well, should that person have been picked? Should this person have been picked? And actually this is what I was talking about, the constructive criticism, should we be doing like players, well, she plays best with this person, she was that, all those kind of conversations. And then even like, we could have then done matchups, England's route to the final, tactically, how are they going to get there? And if it did break down afterwards, which it did, we got bronze, but we didn't get gold. So then the conversations around that as well about, well, what happens now? Who do we need to see in the squad? What tactics we need to change? I think until we can get to this openness, and I know I get myself into trouble because I talk too much, but it all comes from a really good place. And I'm this honest and critical about myself and the people I work with, the teams that I go with as well. It's part of sport. And I would love us to get to a stage where we're just a bit more open about things and more open to different ways of looking at stuff and not be so fearful.
Yeah, we wholeheartedly agree with you on that one. And we were talking with Norma Plummer actually about it, and she's always been that kind of person who's been very upfront. And I think we're starting to see that in the netball world, and it's starting to trickle through, but the progress of that transparency is quite slow. And I think we'll need quite a few more years before it really is just the norm like we see in other sports.
Yeah, 100%. And it's what I said in the article. I truly believe this. We've got to change across the board. Fans have got to want it. They've got to want to access it. Clubs have got to be open to it. The league running it have got to be open to putting stuff out as well. And we've all got to get on board to help each other. We've got to be across the board on everything. Like, think of the stats we could have had and chatted about today to what we've done. And I'm guessing you do what I do, which is go through the league table and count it up yourself. Yes. And that's how I find out my stats. I watch through clips and I write it down and I do it. That's half the battle. So I just think we're at a stage where we could really step forward. And I'd love us to go that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So finally, we would love to touch on the finals and particularly the lead up for each team into the top four. So for me, you have two clear teams who are in very solid form as we head into the weekend, and that's clearly Loughborough and Thunder. Coming off that huge win over Bath on Monday, Loughborough will be certainly riding high into the semi-finals. And despite losing 2 games back-to-back earlier in the season, Thunder are heading into this weekend with 8 straight wins under their belt. On the other side, Rhinos have obviously just come out of isolation and haven't played a match since the 31st of May. And Bath have suffered 2 big losses and haven't won a game since the 29th of May. So with this in mind, how do you see the 2 semi-finals panning out, and where are the key matchups going to be for each team?
Okay, so if you're going on form, going into this right now, you put your money on Loughborough Thunder. But that's what you do. However, I've been the underdog in semi-finals. Casey. I've been in that position, and finals is you saw Serena tweet it. Serena tweeted this week or Instagram to say, the slate's wiped clean, it's finals time now. And it is. I think without Donnell Wellham, Rhinos will struggle. I've been so impressed with Sienna Rushton this year. I think she's been absolutely brilliant, stood up when she needed to. But Donnell is just a different class at the moment. No one expected her to be this good. She's been brilliant. And the feeds from Rhea Dixon, Brie Griss. And I also think Loughborough have found their control that they've been missing in that attack end. Ella Clark had the game of her season last week. And I think defensively now with that Odia Berrin, May, Cobden, it's been brilliant. So I think Loughborough will take that one. Thunder Bath, who knows? The last time they met, 3 goal difference. Thunder led most of the way. Thunder threw everything at them and Bath responded. However, different story after the back of the 2 losses for Bath. I think they've been exposed, but being exposed at this point in the season is not a problem because you've still got a week to fix it. You don't want to be exposed in the semi-finals. So it might be a blessing in disguise for them. Whatever's going to happen, that is going to be one hell of a game.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we absolutely can't wait, and we will see you at the Copper Box, anyone who will be there. And thank you so much, Tamsin, for all your wisdom and insight. It's amazing to hear from you and just hear all of your netball knowledge and thoughts and opinions. It's fantastic. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to episode 20 of Quarter Time. We can't wait to bring you even more netball chat and another awesome guest next week.
Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media at QuarterTimePod for the latest netball updates. Get involved in the conversation online by letting us know what you think of the semi-finals and which players have stood out for you.
Also, if anyone is coming to the Copper Box this weekend, send us a message or send us a picture of you guys there. We'll also be there at the Copper Box, so it'll be great to see some of you guys if you are there. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.